and the experience of some countries that have school meals programs in different stages. We have with us Mrs. Anca Dragu, the president of the Romanian Senate, and the initiator of the pilot hot meal project in 2016, and when she was the Minister of Finance in the Cioloș government. We also have Mr. Anca Dragu, Senator of Romanian Senate, member of the Education Commission. We have Her Excellency Mrs. Marju Takola, the Ambassador of Finland, the country with the oldest national program, initiated in 1941, so that's about 8 years ago, and which now serves as a model for many countries. The tradition is in the hot meal program. We have with us His Excellency Mr. Rahul Srivastava, the Ambassador of India, the country with the largest national program, over 140 million children. It's a huge number. We also have with us Mr. Daniel Balaban, the former president of the Brazilian Education Development Fund for 9 years. He's the director of Center of Excellence Against Hunger and the representative of United Nations World Food Program. We have Ana Ascalcați, World Bank country manager for Romania and Hungary, and we all know all the efforts for school meal programs done by World Bank. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Peter Rodriguez, high official of the World Food Program. So each speaker will present for about 10 minutes. It's going to take your question at the end. Due to the time zone differences, we'll change a bit the protocol, and we'll, with the acceptance of Mrs. Dragu, and we'll start with the representative from Brazil and World Food Program. In the case of Mr. Balaban, in order to be able to answer the question, we'll take the question immediately after his intervention. So let's get started. I'll present a bit Mr. Balaban. So Mr. Daniel Balaban is the director of the Center of Excellence Against Hunger and the representative of United Nations World Food Program. The World Food Program, if you know, delivers food for more than 100 million people in let's say, countries that are plagued by civil wars or by environmental crisis. And I think 80 million of them are children. It's a very important program started after the World War II, continue each year. So, Mr. Daniel Balaban served as special advisor of the Secretariat for Economic and Social Development of the Presidency of the Republic of Brazil.
Honor to be here with you. My mission right now is to present how is the funding mechanism of the Brazilian school meals program. Well, Brazil is a very huge country with 5,570 municipalities, 26 states, the federal district where I am right now, and a population of more than 210 million inhabitants. The country's dimensions bring equally big challenges to run any social program of significant reach like the school meals program. It's important to emphasize that in Brazil, public education is free for all, and that includes school meals in all schools, public schools in Brazil. This is guaranteed in the Constitution as well as within specific laws. Well, this legal framework of the school meals program guarantees a share of the federal yearly budget for all education-related costs, and it's one of the top priorities when Congress is preparing the forecast or the budget for the following year. The Brazilian school meals program attends over 41 million students every day. All the students that are in public schools, they receive for free school meals. So at least in public schools, they serve at least one hot meal a day. So these students are enrolled in around 160,000 public schools spread around the country. The program is responsible for the daily supply for nearly 60 million meals planned by more than 8,000 nutritionists and monitored by 78,000 school feeding council members that they are responsible to monitor the program. So all these factors contributed to the state's decision to run the Brazilian National School Feeding Program as a decentralized program. So I will show you how this works. So coordinating this decentralized arrangement is very tough task. That's why the Ministry of Education has its own operational body, the National Fund for Education Development, FENDE. FENDE is an organism in the Brazilian Ministry of Education responsible for implementing all programs for basic education within the ministry, including school feeding, not just school feeding, but including school feeding. I was, as mentioned, president of FENDEs for 8 years before I joined WFP. So to have a decentralized school meals program in Brazil means sharing important responsibilities and guaranteeing more effective implementation, with each level of the federation playing a role in delivering the program. The central level, the federal government, is responsible for policy deliberation, setting guidelines, and the majority of the program's funding, the resources. The states and municipalities, they are responsible for schools infrastructure, including proper kitchens, water, sanitation, hygiene. They manage food procurement and handle contracts at the local level. They also top up the federal budget allocated for food costs. So PENAI, the school feeding program here in Brazil, has an annual budget around $1 billion, depending on the exchange rate that Brazil has. So $1 billion, around $1 billion for annual budget. This is only the share transferred by the central government to the states and municipalities for food procurement to feed the 41 million students in the public schools in Brazil. So each decentralized executing entity, that is the state or municipality, decides how much they top up this amount with based on different conditions, number of students, and special needs. So the funding, okay, of these resources, this almost $1 billion, the first budget source that funds the school feeding here in Brazil, they are so-called here in Brazil ordinary resources from the national treasury. These correspond to a part of the revenue from over 300 different taxes, including income taxes, contribution taxes from telecommunication services, taxes from the sale of oil or its products. So the same budget is using for funding other public services like health, social assistance, and welfare. And the second, this is the most important part of the school feeding funding in Brazil, comes from the federal lottery. In Brazil, the federal lottery is run by a public bank that transfers nearly half of its revenue to the federal government for investments in social security, in school feeding, education, culture, and public security, and also sports. So Brazil loves lotteries, and you cannot have a private lottery. All needs to be run by the government. So the government takes part of this amount, okay, to fund the school feeding program. So FNDE, the institution, they transfer the funds for school feeding to states and municipalities in 10 installments through bank transfers. So in Brazil, as you know, it's mandatory, the basic education, that it's divided from 6 months to the kindergartens to 5 years of age. We call it the pre-primary education. The primary education is from 6 to 14 years old, and secondary education to 15 to 17 years old. All these kids, they receive for free school meals in the schools in Brazil. And the bank accounts to transfer these funds for each municipality, each entity is created by FNDE, this federal entity. So just for school feeding. So in the basis for calculation made by by FND of how much money school needs for their students is published by a public census. We know how many students Brazil has in each school of the country. Each one of the 160,000 schools, we know how many students they are. So in related to the number of the schools that each municipality has, it's calculated the amount of fund that is going to the schools. It's important to say that at least 30% of the funding for food procurement must be used to buy products direct from the smallholder farmers. Brazil has a great agribusiness and has a lot of smallholder farmers. So smallholder farmers, they are defined by law, and they can sell the production direct for the municipalities for the school feeding. It's important for the economic situation of each municipality, each region of the country. So in a simplified explanation, the flow of funds for the Brazilian school feeding program is FNDE transfer funds to states and municipalities. The states and municipalities, in turn, they transfer these funds to schools directly, or they purchase food items for these schools. The money transferred by FNDE to lower levels of public administration is exclusively directed for purchasing food items, just food items. All the additional costs for the program, including related to infrastructure, should be covered by states and municipalities. And by the end of each fiscal year, all entities responsible by managing the money, they need to submit the expenditure reports to higher instances. So despite its cost is around $1 billion, this represents less than 0.5% of Brazilian tax collection. There are a number of studies around the world that show that the return for investment in school meals may reach 9 times its investment, with an average of 5.5 times return for each dollar invested in the program. So here in Brazil, nobody discusses the importance of the school meals program in the country. It's very important, and Brazil will continue to organize this school meals program. So if you would like to learn more about funding for school feeding programs here in Brazil, I encourage you to request to take part in our virtual study visit, where you'll be able to learn more about the different aspects of the Brazilian school feeding program, including related to financing the program. Also, we have 2 publications available at our website that might interest you. The first one is a policy brief called Financing PNAE, Financing the School Feeding Program here in Brazil. And the second is a collection of good practices in school feeding, financing around the world, how the other countries in the world, they finance school feeding. So everything you can find in wfp.org.br, okay, here in Brazil. And you can find this in our page here in Brazil. So sorry for the time. I tried to make this this speech in 10 minutes. I would like to thank you for this opportunity and say that we are available for further collaborate with Romania. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Balaban. First of all, for joining us today. It is a great honor to have you. We have been previously spoken with Mr. Balaban during the summer because we read about his amazing results with the Brazilian school meal program, and we wanted to learn more because Romania is at the beginning. We plan on building a national food meal program, and we think we have a lot to learn from countries that have such a successful program. Mr. Balaban, before you go, I would have a question for you. You have told us that previously you have assisted other countries to develop their national school meal programs. Could you please tell us more about that? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Our role in the Center of Excellence in Brazil is exactly like that, is to support other countries in the road to establish sustainable school feeding programs. We have a publication of our 10 years showing that we supported around 80 countries in all the continents to create sustainable school feeding programs. Countries in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, even countries in Europe that we had this cooperation. So we support in all levels. Countries that want to start a national school feeding program and countries that want to develop and want to enhance their national school feeding program. So in different levels, in levels to support the purchase from the smallholder farmers, to create the school feeding, like in Mozambique, that we created the school feeding law in Mozambique, and several different countries. So you can find this in our publication that we did 3 days ago about these 10 years that show and resume the countries that received our cooperation. And all these cooperations is totally for free. It's the reason of our mission in Brazil. So each country that would like to receive this cooperation, just ask. Okay, and we will be there to support the country, not just to showing the Brazilian example, but also other examples that we have around the world in terms of countries that are now organizing and establishing school meals programs. So we are ready to work with Romania in wherever you want our support. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Balaban. Because Mr. Balaban cannot stay with us until the end of the conference, I would like to invite the audience and also the other panelists, if they have questions for Mr. Balaban, to address them now. All right. We have a question from Laura Greta Marin. She is the representative of the civil society. She has an NGO who is called Human Catalyst, which performs very sophisticated analysis on the situation of Romanian schools. So, Laura, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hello, Daniel. We met before at the previous meeting. My question is, I presume that at the beginning you couldn't introduce all the schools that are now in the program, but gradually. Have you used any selection criteria for the first years of the school program, Neil? Or if you know other countries that currently are using any criteria selection, of course, it would be the best option to have budget and money to include all the students, but sometimes it is not possible. We have this pilot in Romania since 5 years. There are only 150 schools maximum per year, but we hope, and that's why we are here, to convince the decision makers to fund more schools and more children as beneficiaries. Thank you.
Yeah, very good question. Here in Brazil, the school feeding program serves all the public schools, all. It's universal. But it was not in the beginning of the program. Of course, when Brazil started this national school feeding program, there was not enough fund to fund all the schools. So Brazil decided to fund the poorest regions of the country. So based on the census, the poorest regions where we have the poorest population, Brazil decided to fund these schools in the poorest regions. And each year, the Congress decided to increase, okay, the fund for other schools. Right now, in the last 20 years, Brazil has a universal, so cover all the schools in the country. But in the beginning, it was focused in the poorest regions of the country because there was not enough fund. But the idea was to start with the poorest and each year increasing at least 10% until the moment that you are covering all the schools in the country. So the Congress has a very important role because they need to provide funds for each year to increase the coverage of the school feeding. So you can make a plan for 5 or 10 years to cover all the schools, public schools, of course, not private schools, just the public schools in the country. So that's what Brazil has made. And other countries in the world that they don't have enough funds, they decided to cover the poorest regions. But they decided also to increase, okay, at least 5 or percent or 10% of this coverage by each year.
Thank you very much for your elaborate answer and keep in touch. Good luck.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. I would like to ask the audience if there is anyone else that would like to pose a question to Mr. Balaban. Right. Otherwise, if not, I would have one last question, and that is, how is responsibility shared between the central government and the local government? Because Brazil is a federation, and such a big program makes us to be very interested in how it is managed, how our responsibilities shared. Thank you.
Okay, Brazil has a shared education system. Okay, Brazil has different. The tax system in Brazil is very. We should need at least 5 hours to explain the tax system in Brazil. It's very complex. But Brazil has a fund for education, call it Fundeb. It's a fund of federal taxes, okay, that goes to each municipality and each state just to fund education at all, not school feeding, education at all, to pay the teachers, to pay all the facilities for the schools. And the other fund is this that I show it to you from the lotteries that goes to the school feeding. This fund is a federal, okay? And how the money goes to the municipalities and to the schools. It goes related to the number of students in each school. So if you have more students, you receive more funds. If you have less students, you receive less funds. So this is important to have a census. Every year, Brazil has a census, so they know how many students are in each public school in Brazil. This is important. We need to have data, okay, if you want to organize a program like that. And so it's calculated the amount related to the number of students. So this amount is sent in 10 installments, okay, in the regular year from February to November. And the municipalities, they receive this money and they purchase the food for school feeding. They can also use more funds from municipalities or from the states that they have. Okay, they don't need to use just the federal budget. The federal budget is this budget that I mentioned, around $1 billion each year. But Brazil has the school feeding more, 1 billion that comes from the municipalities and states that they use proper funds to fund their school feeding program also. So that's how, and of course, the funds that are sent from the federal level, they need to be rendered accounts, and each municipality has a council, okay, with members from civil society to fiscalize the use of these funds. So here in Brazil, there's a lot of corruption in other areas, but in school feeding, there's less corruption because there is a fiscalization from civil society. So the parents of the students, they fiscalize the use of the funds. So this is important for the Brazilian school feeding program right now. And it's important for any country that is trying to organize a national school feeding, a school meals program.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Balaban. And we are looking forward to continue our talks, and thank you very much for offering us assistance. All right.
Thank you for this opportunity, and we will be always available to support when what you need to have in the future a Romanian school meals program. Okay, just ask, we will be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It is really good to hear that. Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel Balaban. It was great to have you here.
Thank you.
We are now ready for our next speaker today. And we will talk about, I will give a brief presentation of him. Mr. Peter Rodriguez is a Senior Partnership Officer at the UN Food System Summit Secretariat, or in short, the UN World Food Program. Mr. Rodriguez has a very rich humanitarian assistance experience. He has joined the World Food Program in 1999, so he is a man with a lot of experience, having worked in many countries such as Angola, Zambia, Myanmar, Haiti, Gaza, Somalia, Mozambique. And today, Mr. Rodriguez will give us a global perspective on the school meal programs. Mr. Rodriguez, you have the floor. Thank you for being with us today. Kindly check your microphone because we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you still. All right, now it works.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I had audio issues in the beginning. I could not hear, so my apologies for that. I started hearing what Daniel was speaking. So my apologies for that. Technology is not on my side today. Hopefully it will be for the next 15, 20 minutes at least. Anyway, thank you very much for the introduction. May I just say, Your Excellencies and all those present in this meeting. Indeed, and before I start, I am a long-term humanitarian worker, not only WFP for the last 22 years, but I've been around for some more time, and school feeding has been my passion. So I'm speaking from that point of view. I'm not the current head of school feeding. There's actually a unit in headquarters here at the World Food Program to do it. But I'll just give you a little bit on that and stop me when it's 10 minutes in case I carry on. All countries have school feeding. That's a starter. One way or the other, one form or the other, privately run, government run, and there are a whole lot of examples on trying to do that. Overall, there are, I think, 380 or 500 million students around there who do not have access to meals in the school. And WFP has been doing school feeding for, I think, the last 30, 40 years, and again, in different forms, in different ways. There's always a very, very scientific way on how WFP approaches it. There's always a food security assessment which is done, especially in the programs run directly with it. And once it's done, they try to see what type of intervention would be best suited. And interestingly enough, at peak, we've had almost 30% of the total number of beneficiaries through our school feeding program in different ways. Currently, we feed almost 90 to 100 million people on a daily basis globally. So school feeding is an important part of social safety net, and it is very much appreciated by the country, by the students who receive it, and those who were part of the program in the 60s and 70s are holding senior positions and are also still champions of promoting the school feeding program. Ideally, over a period of time, instead of just giving standard food, the role of nutrition came in trying to identify what is the need. We believe that, on an average, if a meal is about 400 odd calories, and if you compare it with students who do not get a proper meal, they do have, they've made much more progress in terms of weight and in terms of nutrition. It reduces anemia, increases iron, vitamin, especially if fortified foods are used. It is one of the first and foremost safety net countries want to adopt. I see my colleague here from the World Bank. When we had the food and fuel crisis in 2007, 2008, a lot of the requests which came from countries to the bank and other financial institutions was to fund school feeding program. And that is a time when the World Bank even got interested in saying what is happening. They thought they would get like other requests that came in. And there's a very interesting publication which came through, which with the World Food Program and other people. It's called The State of School Feeding. And, it was an eye opener for many who did not believe in that. Except, there were a lot of people on that. It's always a challenge for the finance ministers to allocate if he doesn't have proof, if I may say so, evidence, which everybody look for. So that was an eye opener for many, many countries. And since then, there has been a lot of interest in this one. I think Daniel has already spoken about the return on investment on the thing. But, there has been a big push globally. I'll talk a little bit on the recently concluded Heads of State Summit, which we had led by the Secretary General on food systems, which we've been working on for the past years. There's actually a coalition of countries led by 60 countries, and 50 non-governmental organizations, both national and international, who formed a coalition, and because they think it is a game changer. And you probably find a lot of information on that with schoolmealscoalition.org. I can send you the link later on there. And it's going to be launched by President Macron, I think, early next week on that. So the countries and school feeding transcends, from north to south to east to west, and all levels of economic status of the country. So that's how important these countries felt during the whole discussion for the last year and a half on what are the game changers to established food systems. So this is something very, very interesting, which is happening now. And I would encourage you to look at it and join, not necessarily join the coalition, but learn from what the 60 countries are trying to preach. Why is it important? They're bringing a lot of evidence to the table. The World Food Program has between 20 to 25 million people in more than 60 countries with school feeding programs. So what Daniel mentioned, we just expanded, and then we actually have a big division here which can provide all sorts of information again on wfp.org, and I can also send you some links. There are very interesting studies on what is the major impact it has. Let it be, from the Nordic countries to the most poorest countries, or even like Spain, UK. They're all now beginning to see the need of the thing. Why school feeding is important to every country? First of all, it is an important safety net in case of a food emergency or food deficit or planning. The first and the most vulnerable are children, school-going children. If they are left behind, it's again a sizable percentage of your population. So if you have to intervene, that would be your first target place for safety net. That's how a lot of the countries give importance to that. There's a whole lot of issue on the double burden. If you see, in terms of obesity, which the children are doing, in especially a lot of the countries in Europe, and even countries in Africa and Asia, it's picking up a lot. The huge challenge and the cost to the government in combating that and treating that is going to be very, very high in terms of economics and national budgeting. So a lot of people are paying attention to that. What is the cost? It runs into billions of dollars and a big percentage of the GDP. So that's one thing you can combat. by just sensitization. I have a very interesting example. In Malawi, actually, good food habits is part of a curriculum of the teacher's training course. You know, I found it very, very interesting when I visited about, I think, 5, 6 years ago, that in a teacher's training school, they have a subject on good nutrition in school, and that is then passed on to the kids. Can you imagine a healthy generation coming up in terms of working ahead that? So that promotes healthy eating habits. Obviously, the role of nutrition, as much as local food as possible. And I was looking at the statistics of Romania. If you see in the one of the reports which I saw, please, my apologies if it's not correct information. There's been a drop in school attendance. There's been a drop in the enrollment of the school. Now, if we do not have enough incentive of anything, there is an impact economically to the country over the next 2, 3 generations. So it is very important that there's an investment, there's a nutritional investment in the school, because I don't know much about the demographics of Romania, and having not visited that place, but there's always a difference on how you treat the schools in the urban area than how you treat the schools. Eating the right nutritious food makes a lot of difference. Obviously, there's a whole lot of challenge which a lot of the countries are facing today. One is unemployment. So you have the health issue, you have the attendance issue, and then you have the unemployment issue. If this is an incentive to do that, the country can guarantee itself of a reasonably well-educated children coming out of academics. It can depend on skills development, and obviously it'll have an impact that better skilled, better educated. There are a lot of studies which show that have a direct impact on the economy of the country. I mean, just the nutrition. I think some of the studies which have been done in a number of countries in Africa show an impact of 5 to 7% of the GDP if you have a good nutritional program in the country. So, but each country needs a different approach. Each country needs to develop the local skills, and each country needs to find what is the best solution based on the thing. But if you're looking for evidence to convince the Ministry of Finance, if I may call it, it is important to find the evidence. And like Danielle said, they've got publications in the World Food Program. The School Feeding Unit has a lot of publications. The World Bank, my colleague, they have a lot of evidence on to show why is it one of the best social safety nets. And this post-COVID period is going to have a major, major impact. We had 380 million children who could not go to school at all during the year and a half. So UNICEF, World Food Program, and others got together and said what needs to be done to be able to take forward on this one. So there are publications available and I can send you some of those links to be able to do it. And there is a lot of new trust by both developed and developing countries. Like I said, 60 Minutes through this coalition, and it'll also tell those decision makers on why is it important to be able to go through. I think I can continue if there's time, but I can stop and take more questions. And I'd rather be a dialogue and question and answers, so that I'm not the only one speaking, and I'm at least speaking what the people want to listen to. I'll stop here, Andre.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Peter Rodriguez. We will have another Q&A session at the end of all the presentations to let the information settle and to allow the audience formulate their questions. Thank you very much. And I will give the floor to Cătălin so that we can present the next speaker. Thank you.
So we have now Anca Dragu. She's the president of Romanian Senate since December 2020, being the first woman to hold this position. And what I want to tell you, she managed in these less than 12 months to humanize the institution. Basically, it's the first human person who holds the presidency of the Romanian Senate. she created a program of, let's say, expositions, of art exposition, of open gates days. She she had some events related to children, so she's absolutely great, and I can't wait to see the next events she'll organize. So between November 2015 and January 2017, she was Minister of Finance, and she launched during her term the school meal pilot program, and also developed a public platform dedicated to general budget expenditures, a tool that significantly contributes to transparency of public finances. And I'm sure if she would stay Minister of Finance for 3-4 more years, the transparency in Romania wouldn't be a big issue as we have it now. Anca Dragu has a BA in Finance and Banking, Insurance and Stock Exchanges at the Academy of Economical Studies and holds a PhD in Economics. She attended a postgraduate program in Economics and International Affairs at Georgetown University in the United States of America, and has a MA degree in Public Policy at CNSP Bucharest. Previously, she worked at the National Bank of Romania as a Ministry of Finance, the European Commission, the International Monetary Fund, and E.ON Romania. So, Anca, please, you have the floor. You are the mother of the Romanian school meal programs.
Thank you, Cătălin, and I don't have enough words to tell you how happy and honored I am to be here with you today, talking about education, kids, and this program, School Meal. Indeed, at the end of 2015, I had the honor to become Minister of Finance. Actually, it was exactly 6 years ago when I accepted the nomination, November 11, 2015. And although it was not my job as Minister of Finance is presumed to cut expenditures and to refuse all expenditures, or new expenditures, I decided to go for this program because the situation of the Romanian schools was and still is the following. Kids are studying in shifts, if you are familiar with the concept. Some kids go to school from 7 or 8 in the morning to 1 p.m. And some other kids go from 1 p.m. to 6 or 7 p.m. and that's it. So it means that parents, they never know where kids are, and they have to, we don't have school transportation. So for parents, it's a real burden. Also for parents in remote areas, it's a real problem. Also in vulnerable areas, you may imagine how even bigger problem it is. And so I decided to go for this program, and my thinking was to start with a number of schools, let's say 50 schools, out of a total number of 5,000 schools. Actually, we may even say 10,000. It depends on how you count. So, because the idea was to design the program and to find in 1 year the shortcomings, and then to expand to gradually to the entire system within 5 to 7 years. As Cătălin was mentioning, I left after 1 year and 2 months. I left the government, and nobody expanded the program. It was simply abandoned. And but now we are in the parliament, and I am so happy that so many colleagues are interested in this program. So we are teaming up. We put all our efforts together and push for expanding this program. So I was telling you that schools kids were going in shifts. This is a very odd concept for some of you, and the explanation is that well, some districts grew up overnight in Romania, and also demography was very, very positive before 89. Well, and the building of new school facilities was lagging behind. So we ended up with the situation, but 32 years after, we are almost still there, unfortunately. Yeah. And so we need to have kids to study from 8 o'clock to 5 p.m. And we have in our program such a policy. Of course, it takes time and money. And also for all kids to have a meal program in schools. What can I tell you? The program would cost less than 1 billion euros per year. You may say okay, the amount is small or big, but I think each and every penny worth being implemented and spent in this way, because we have the highest drop of school rate in the EU. We have also very bad qualitative indicators in terms of the quality of school and so on. So this would be for sure the best spent money in my opinion, as a finance person also. So. What's next? We need to continue the program, to have the program designed and implemented on continuous basis, because until now we have only approved it for a year, which is nonsense. Also, we need to have the possibility to expand the program. I'm asked by directors, school principals, how they may expand. Well, it is up to the decision of the local authorities, and local authorities are not very rich. Unfortunately, in 2017, the revenues of local authorities were cut. So the policies were not coherent at all, and were not helping kids and schools at all, unfortunately. So what we need to do right now, how I see, is to create a platform where all schools to get enrolled and to be able to assess based on some criteria to prioritize this school access to the program. So to expand it on a gradual base, but also on a sort of scientific base, to make sure that we spend in the best and most efficient way the scarce resources we have. And this is basically, these are the basic questions we want to, I'd like to have more answers to these questions in today's discussions. I'll stop here, and thank you so much for gathering together here at the Parliament. And it's only first meeting in this format, but there will be many, because my target is to have until the end of 2024 to have 70% of schools enrolled in in this program. And we have to find money, we have to find political will. We have to do this simply, we have to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this overview. Mrs. Anca Dragu is indeed the mother of the program, as we say, and we are very, very lucky. Yeah, in English, the usual expression is father of the program, but in this case, we are happy that we have, we have Anca Dragu, because it is important to start. It takes many years for the program to develop, but in the end, it will. The important thing is that we started. We are the 5th edition of the program, and of course, there are many things to improve at the program. That's why we're here, because we like to learn from your experiences to see what is the best way for Romania to do it. Our next speaker today is His Excellency Rahul Shrivastava. It's India's ambassador to Romania since July 2020, which is also accredited for Moldova and Albania. We are very honored to have His Excellency here. He will give us a brief overview over the Indian school meal program, which is the biggest school meal program in the world. His Excellency Rahul Shrivastava has become an ambassador at the age of 40, being the youngest ambassador of India appointed at that time. He's also passionate about books, and he is the author himself of several works. We are very honored to have you here, Your Excellency. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Mrs. Anca Dragu, a very good afternoon. And my dear friend Kathleen, the time my friend said that we'll have this program on midday meal, I said that I'll surely come, because I know the kind of interest and enthusiasm that Kathleen has on this topic. And I was also very glad to know about the interest and the kind of work that Mrs. Dragu has done in this direction. Well, about the midday meals in the program in India, the program actually has a very long history. And in fact, before the Pan India program started, or before we had the program rolled out by the central government, the program actually started in bits and pieces. The year is actually 1925. So in next 4 years, we'll be actually completing 100 years of midday meal program in India. So in 1925, it was introduced in one state, Madras, which is now Tamil Nadu. So for disadvantaged children, it was introduced in Madras Municipal Corporation. So that is when it started. But by the mid 1980s, three more states, Gujarat, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu, and also the Union Territory of Pondicherry, they had a universalized program uh, from their own resources, because by this time the central government had not come into the picture. And then by 1990 or 91, the number of states which were implementing the midday meal program from their own resources on a universal or a very large scale had increased to 12 states. And thereafter, the national government or the central government came in when we launched a centrally sponsored scheme, what was called then the National Program of Nutritional Support for to Primary Education, NP-NSP. This started in the year 1995. And by the year 1997 and 98, this program, NP-NSP, was introduced in all of India. So we can say that the Pan-India program started somewhere around 95 to 97. In the year 2002, this program, which was earlier for the only for the government-aided schools, it was also extended to the non-formal education (NFE) centers. In India, we call them the what is covered under the Education Guarantee Scheme, or what is known as Alternative and Innovative Education (EGS) and AID. So in 2002, not just the government and government-aided schools were covered, but also the NFE centers came under the program. And in 2007, a further expansion happened, because till 2007, the program used to cover only the classes from 1 to 5. And in the year 2007, it was extended to classes right up to class 8. So from 5 to 8, the program was extended. September this year, we further fine-tuned the program, and the program is now called PM Poshan. In India, Poshan means nutrition. So this is a scheme which has been launched for a period of 5 years, starting from 2021 till 2025-26. I'll come to some details because of this PM Poshan, because some changes, innovative changes have taken place in this. Apart from the timeline that I gave about how the program expanded from a few states to all of India, in addition, some other changes have been taking place. For example, when the program started, the midday meal scheme used to cover 100 calories for one child for the primary school, or about say 8 to 12 grams of protein, and that has now that expanded to about 300 calories in the year 2004, and then further expanded to 450 calories and 12 grams of protein for the children studying in classes from 1 to 5. The calorific value for children in the upper primary, which is from 6 to 8, is 700 calories and 20 grams of protein for them. In India, the program is implemented, I'm sure it happens in other countries also, it's implemented in two ways. One is the decentralized model, and the other is the centralized model. And in the decentralized model, this is the more widespread practice. And in the decentralized model, the meals are cooked on site by the local cooks and helpers or self-help groups. In the centralized model, we have an external organization which cooks and delivers the meals to schools, mostly through public-private partnerships. And we have more centralized kitchens, especially in urban areas. Again, to give an example how this centralized model works, there are various organizations, NGOs which participate. There's one organization, say, called Akshay Patra, and one organization reaches out to 1.8 million children in 20,000 schools. To give you an idea about the numbers about across India, the scheme, the midday meal scheme, right now what is called PM Poshan, that covers about 118 million children studying in 1.12 million schools across the country. There are just about 3 million cooks and helpers which are employed to carry out the scheme. And in terms of the funding that the government does, from the central government, funding is about 60%, and the states contribute about 40%, which means that in the years 2020-21, the government spent about 3.5 US billion dollars, and the states contribution was about 1.5 US billion dollars. So that is about 60% and 40% contribution. About the PM Poshan program that I said, what is happening right now till 2025-26, some innovative methods were introduced. One is called Tithi Bhojan, which what is Tithi Bhojan? It means that it is a community participation program and in which people provide special food to children on special occasions. So not just private organizations or NGOs participating, but even families at an individual level, they can participate in this. Then the second experiment that we are carrying out is to have school nutrition gardens, uh, which is to give children first-hand experience about nature and gardening. And the harvest of these gardens is used in the scheme to provide additional micronutrients. And the school nutrition garden, we have already developed in more than 300,000 schools. The third innovative method that was introduced in this PM Poshan program right now is cooking competitions, so that this encourages right from village level to national level to promote ethic cuisine and innovative menus based on locally available ingredients and vegetables. So these are 2-3 small changes that have been made. And we have found, like in all countries across the world, more so in the developing countries, what are the benefits of the midday meal scheme? So these are some which happened in case of India. We found that the provision of cooked meal in school increases enrollment, which is very obvious, as well as attendance of children. And in addition, it contributes to addressing the issue of classroom hunger. It improves nutrition among children, provides opportunities for socialization, as well as challenging social norms. An example of this is in India, we strongly encourage cooks to be from the underprivileged sections of the society and mostly women. So if you go to some local school in India, you will find cooks are women and from the underprivileged sections of the society. These are some of the advantages, but we also did a study recently because, as I said, it has been more than one generation since the Pan India program has been implemented. A recent study found that the midday meal scheme in India has actually intergenerational effects on child nutrition through improving the mother's health and educational levels. So these are the benefits that we find has happened in India. Again, as I said, it's a privilege to be participating in this webinar, given the kind of interest both Mrs. Dragu and Kathleen have on this subject. I hope that at some point of time in Romania also, you'll be able to have a pan-Romania midday meal scheme. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this very good overview over the India school meal program. I would like to ask the audience to think about questions for you for the Q&A session. And I will now give the floor to MP Cătălin Teniță to introduce the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, or my friend Rahul. It's very complicated to find the proper title. Now there is a bit of change in the program. Mr. Irineu Dărău will be the next one because he will have some TV apparition in 20-30 minutes. So I'll ask Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Finland, Marju Akola, to excuse us. So Irineu Dărău is a member of the Senate in the Romanian Parliament, being elected in the constituency of Brașov County. He's the Secretary of the Commission for Education, Youth and Sports and the member of Commission for Work, Family and Social Protection. He is a geek like me. He's a computer scientist by profession. maybe sometime we'll find the time to do some programming for the civic society. He's a former Olympian in computer science and history, with a bachelor and master degree in computer science at the University of Bucharest. Irineu Darău has over 15 years of international experience in IT and entrepreneurship, and he was involved in several civic projects, the most important of which are within the Civic Academy Foundation, the Center of Investigation of Crimes of the Community in Romania. After many years abroad, Darău returned to Romania, determined to get actively involved in building efforts for a better future. He's one of my best friends in the parliament, and we work on a lot of initiatives together, one of them being along with Mrs. Dragu and some other colleagues from the Chambers of Deputies, let's say the set of laws to define the National School Meal Program. Thank you very much. You now have the floor. We can't hear you. No?
No?
One more time?
Yeah, now I think now we can hear you.
Now it's all right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much, and it's an honor for me to be here today. I thank to all the guests which are sharing important information for us, and I will be rather short because I am very curious to listen and to learn more about the reasons of the other programs, the impact, and the practical solutions. Because as Anca and Cătălin described, we are rather in the very beginning of the implementation of this program in Romania, and that's why I will explain you very shortly which is the current state of this program in Romania and the particularities, because Cătălin spoke about the laws we have now on the table. And in fact, every year when this program was implemented, it has been done by an emergency ordinance of the government. So in fact, the time span, if you want, of this program is every time just 1 year. This year, when we entered the parliament and we had the emergency ordinance on our table in order to approve it by a law, of course, we needed to accept the situation for only 1 year, but what we try to do is to prolong for 1 semester for next year, but also even more important, to introduce in this law some improvements in order to prepare, if you want, next years of the implementation of the program, because all these 5 years, this program was called a pilot, but unfortunately, it was not very well coordinated and followed up. So even after 5 years of pilot programs, we don't have very objective and complete data about how it went on the field. And also we saw that about 30% of the schools officially enrolled by the law were not implementing this program, which is very worrying. So what we tried is to add to this law some instruments for monitoring the program, for transparently gather data about the implementation. But unfortunately, these amendments of ours worked just partially, because in the second in the Camera of Deputies, some of them failed, were turned down by some of other parties. But anyway, we succeeded to put something there better in the law. And in fact, what we are advocating, if you want, is to try every year not only to extend the program to more schools, but also to gather more data in order, as Anca said, to be able to get in an efficient way in a few years to 70% of schools, or why not to all schools in Romania. Some of you spoke about the budget necessary and the high impact multiplied impact of such a program. We will advocacy for more budget for this program every year from now on, and we have a high deficit in Romania, especially in these times. But giving your argument that when you put maybe €1 in such a program, you get out 5 to 10 euros. I think such investments can be done even on deficit, because a few years later you will get more money and added value in society from it. What we also did was to contribute a bit to some changes in the hygiene related norms elaborated by the government, because there were some very strict and pretentious conditions to serve these meals. So now we have some better conditions, and we can serve meals more easily. And one last idea we are trying to get in the law, but also in the government, is to, as today we have just a few schools in the program, is to prioritize, if you want, the disadvantaged schools, and to add more disadvantaged schools gradually, because we have some objective index developed by an NGO, and instead of picking schools without very clear reasons, it's better to start with most disadvantaged schools. And now we have clear and objective data in order to know which are these schools, and just to have an idea, about 500,000 pupils are in this category of disadvantaged and very disadvantaged schools. I speak about pupils of 14 years maximum. So in the end, I just say that I think, and it's one of my political beliefs, that nothing is more important than education for a country and for a people. And we need to generalize this meal program to almost all schools in Romania, because this will open a lot of possibilities for school from 8 to 5, for school for everybody, for eliminating or diminishing the drop-off rate. And we need this for a better society in the future, and for better citizens finally. Thank you so much again. It was an honor for me.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Mr. Irinel Darău, our senator, is one of the ambassadors of the school meal program, alongside Anca Dragu, the president of the Senate, and Cătălin Tăniță. All three of them are the hosts of today's event. And this event is a very timely one, because Romania is about to pass its approval law of the ordinance that regulates the 5th edition of the school meal programs. That's why it's very important that we discuss about this topic now. Next, I would like to introduce Her Excellency Marju Takola, which is Finland's ambassador to Romania since 17th of June 2019. Her Excellency will give us an overview of the Finnish school meal program, which is perhaps one of the best in the EU and also one of the first in the world. We made some research on this program because we are using it as a model, and we hope to be able at some point to be as performant as Finland. And we were very impressed to see that Finland manages to give a free meal to all children aged between 6 and 18 years old, with less than €3 per meal, which is impressive. We are very eager to learn about how you do it. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, to Madam President of the Senate, and Your Excellencies and honorable members of the Parliament, and all the participants online and offline. I'm very honored to be here, and thank you very much for this initiative and invitation. I'm very happy to introduce the Finnish experiences, and I also commend the work what you have been doing and what you will be doing by the parliamentarians to advance the school feeding here in Romania. And I think what I'm going to introduce and tell you, I think it will verify that how important it is and to have a school feeding in the country. Well, as you said, Finland was the first country in the world to introduce the free school meal. Actually, it was also surprising for me, 1948. So this year we are celebrating the 73 years after it was introduced. Of course, in the beginning, it was very simple. It was like a soup or the porridge, because at that time Finland was a very poor country, and just experienced the two wars. But over the years, we managed to develop it as a nutritionally balanced and very comprehensive concept, and we see that it has very much contributed also to the high-level education what the Finland is enjoying in these days and these years. And I'll give you a couple of issues of this concept. This is not only about eating. It's not at all about eating and providing school feeding. So in Finland, we see the school feeding as the first of all pedagogical tool that promotes physical and social well-being. So for us, if I put it very simply, school meals are about eating and learning together. So they are very much combined. And well, of course, one of the key purposes of the school meal is to support preventive health care. It's very important to mention also this preventive health care, and of course the social protection. And as it was already highlighted and pointed out by Mr. Rodriguez. But at the same time, the meals offer also the good opportunity for teaching healthy nutrition and eating habits. But then another side of the coin, we also believe that while we are eating together, the pupils learn together important social and communication skills, such as taking into consideration other pupils, waiting in line for their turn, washing hands before eating. It's really, we are going through the pandemic, so washing hands, it's one of the most important habits in these days. Thanking the kitchen staff for the food, so we are talking about the manners, and then of course the cleaning up after themselves. And of course, the school feeding concept in Finland, it's not without the sustainability. It's one of the key and one of the most important principle in Finnish school feeding concept. So this means in practice that municipalities are encouraged to use seasonal and local products, and the schools aim at reducing food waste by advising students to take appropriate amount of food, and of course by sorting out the waste and then organizing zero food waste campaigns. So sustainability is very important. And there are also some examples of some schools serving surplus food to the public for a small charge. And then thirdly, I would like to highlight the very active community participation, because this is the issue of the whole community. And here we are talking about the pupils, teachers, parents, together participating in discussion in the development of the school feeding, because this is again like the education system. The school feeding is also part of the evolving process. And part of this participation is, of course, that the pupils can and they give regularly feedback, what kind of a content and individual meals, etc. Then few words of the administration. We have the decentralized system. Well, I would say that it's very very strongly decentralized, but there is also the state level involved. So it's mandatory by the law for all municipalities to provide adequate financial and human resources, including premises, school canteens. And this system, which is very important, it's regularly planned, monitored, and evaluated. And as it was said as already that there are free school meals and for the primary and the secondary school between the 6 and 18 years old. And the school feeding concept or system covers also kindergartens. This is important. But the meals in this case are included in the daycare fee paid by the parents. As regards to there has been a lot of discussion on the funding. The school feeding is part of the general funding of education, and it's covering about 6% of total education cost in municipalities, 6%. And then the average, national average for the single school meal in basic education is only €2.80. And the total annual cost per pupil is about 530 euros. So it's not, the question isn't about the money. It's about the investment in the well-being of children and the investment in our future, the future of the children. Then just, I wanted to also give you some very few practical points how the school feeding system is organized. There are catering services. They can be municipally owned or they can be private companies, and those are the ones who are producing the meals. Many schools are equipped by their own kitchens where catering staff prepare and serve all the food from the start to finish, but the trend is to build more efficient central kitchen systems where the food is prepared either partially or fully and then transported to schools. But municipalities decide by themselves how they want to organize everything. And then what is actually the typical Finnish school meal? It's a hot dish, salad, and drink. And here we are not talking about the soft drinks. We are talking about milk or plant-based milk, or of course water is always available. And then whole grain bread with margarine. So you can see, because whole bread. So this, the Finnish school feeding system is very much based on the national nutrition recommendations, which are systematically also updated. And when we are talking about 2000, vegetarian option is always available at schools. It's very important. More and more children are vegetarians. And of course, the special dietary meals based on illnesses or the religion, they are available on demand. So to put it in a nutshell, there are 4 key features in our school feeding system. So health and welfare, then this how the school feeding system supports learning. Very important. Then there is a national guidance from the ministries, from the level of the ministries. There are, of course, the Ministry of Education and Culture. Then there is a ministry, for the pedagogical point of view. Then there is a Ministry of Social and Health from the health point of view. Then there is a Ministry of Agriculture from the food safety and the food policy point of view. But the municipalities are the ones who are responsible for organizing and decision making. So the state level is only directing the money to municipalities and then give very general objectives. And then fourth, there is of course the long-term commitment and cooperation between these different actors, between the companies, school, municipal administration, then the ministries and the municipalities. So I'm heading towards the conclusion. I would like to mention that we were very honored when our Minister for Development Cooperation and Foreign Trade, Mr. Ville Skinnari, was appointed a global champion for school feeding by the UN World Food Programme for this year, 2021. And in this role, the Minister Skinnari has been promoting global awareness of school meals and seeking funding sources for school feeding programs. And the minister is also heading the International School Feeding Coalition. So this is very important that we have been contributing and we continue to contribute into this issue. And this is the priority for the government and for the embassies. just the last point, which was raised also here in the webinar regarding the impact study. We haven't done any impact study, but I think we see the very strong linkage between the learning results and the school feeding. So I think the Finland is a good example of this link, that how the school feeding has positively contributed to the learning results. And also the school feeding the attendance into the school feeding is very high. Practically almost all the pupils are eating the school meals at schools. And of course we see it from, it must be seen also from the impact point of view on economy. Children are receiving the hot meals at school, so the parents can be, concentrate on their work. So it's a very also the gender issue in that respect. And then just if I may comment regarding the criteria which was raised by Madam President of the Senate. Of course, Romania is the one who decides the criteria based on the local circumstances, and it's always good to assess the experiences of the pilot project. And I very much agree with Mr. Dara, what he was saying, that to concentrate on the disadvantaged schools. I think also the experiences worldwide speak for this, and the law is always a very good instrument to apply to the municipalities and the local representatives. So thank you very much for this again for this opportunity, and as always the embassy and the Finland and the experts in Finland, we are actually experts on the school feeding system. They are ready, they are at your disposal, and we are ready to share our experiences further anytime. So thank you so much, and thank you for this initiative. It's a great initiative.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this presentation. We are indeed in very distinguished company, and we have here one of the best speakers that we could have in a panel on the school meals program. I was especially interested in the Finnish model because of the way it is designed, and that is you have those municipal kitchens where the food is cooked and then it is delivered to schools. One of the biggest issues that we are confronted with right now is the lack of infrastructure. So I believe we can definitely learn something from the Finnish way. So thank you very much once again, Your Excellency, and I hope we will have you to the Q&A session to address you more questions.
Yes,
and
sure.
I will give the floor to the co-moderator, MP Catalin Tăniță, to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Our next speaker is Anna Ahalkati. She's the World Bank Country Manager for Romania and Hungary since July 1st, 2021. She oversees the World Bank program and leads pro-policy dialogue with government counterparts, private sector, civil society, and other relevant constituencies in our two countries. Before joining the World Bank Group, she worked at the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs and the Parliament of Georgia, so she knows the region, as well as in private sector consulting. She's an alumni of Central Eurasia Leadership Academy and IFEC's Global Business Leadership Program. Anna has co-authored a number of IFEC publications on a range of private sector development issues. She holds an MA in Economics Policy Management for University of Clermont-Ferrand, France, and in Human Geography from the Tbilisi State University, Georgia. She's a graduate as a joint Vienna Institute, Austria. So Anna, you have the floor, and thank you very much for being involved in our dialogue and also in, let's say, our project of bringing a school program from each children in Romania.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for inviting me to share some thoughts on school meals as an instrument of public policies to address learning gaps and inequality of opportunities. I'm very honored to be part of this distinguished panel and to represent here the World Bank. And let me start by quoting a couple of numbers. According to World Bank's Human Capital Index, a child born today in Romania will be only 58% as productive when she grows up as she could be if she enjoyed complete education and full health. And one of the reasons for this is the difference between how long children stay in school and how much they actually learn while being schooled. As such, a Romanian child who starts school at age 4 today can expect to complete 11.8 years of school by her 18th birthday, which is less than in 2010 and lower than many other countries in Europe. But what is even more noteworthy is that if we factor in what children actually learn, the child, in fact, gets only equivalent of 8.4 years of learning. So in 2018, the World Bank published the World Development Report, which was called Learning to Realize Education's Promise. In this report, we argued that countries needed to promote learning, not just schooling. But what do children need to learn? They need a school that is safe, well-equipped, clean, that has fresh air, heating and light, that has sanitary facilities. They need transport to access the school or technology to access learning online. They need books and school supplies, and they need a teacher that knows how to teach, a vaccinated teacher to stop the spread of COVID-19 and to allow schools to stay safely open and provide quality learning. And children need to be healthy, well-nourished, and not hungry if they were to maximize learning in line with their abilities. So as such, learning is a result of a multi-dimensional ecosystem, as Ambassador Acol emphasized, and their policies that we engage to improve learning and educational outcomes for our children and help our children grow into healthy adults should also be multi-dimensional. So esteemed panelists before me discussed about the merits of school meals programs in various countries. We heard very interesting examples from Brazil, Finland, India. These examples and many studies that the bank has done confirm that a quality education combined with a package of health and nutrition interventions at school, such as school feeding, can contribute to child and adolescent development and further strengthen a country's human capital. School feeding programs can help get children into schools and keep them at schools, thus increasing enrollment and reducing absenteeism. School meals are used differently across countries, as we have already heard today. In some countries, the school meal is used more to ensure all kids get access to nutritious meals, while in less developed countries, it is used as an incentive to send children to school and continue their education. In both cases, though, school meals contribute to helping students become healthy, breaking the cycle of poverty. The benefits are especially great for the poorest and most disadvantaged children. In the most vulnerable communities, school meals can offer children a regular nutrient source that is essential for their mental and physical development. In Latin America, as we heard some examples, school feeding programs are a key intervention in reducing undernutrition and promoting healthy diet choices. Overall, one of the studies that we did showed that between 2009 and 2016, school feeding programs benefited nearly 270 million children in 89 economies. More than 20% of these children were from the poorest fifths of the population in terms of the income distribution. In Slovakia, Latvia, and Uruguay, more than 50% of the beneficiaries belonged to the poorest quintile. Over the past 10 years, there has been a paradigm shift in understanding the role of school feeding as a development instrument. In particular, the recognition of its significant benefits for multiple dimensions, including health, education, social protection, and the local agri-food industry. We basically are talking about two streams of mutually reinforcing benefits generated by school feeding. The first one is higher returns to human capital development, as reflected in improved education and health outcomes, as I have mentioned already earlier. And the second stream is the benefits to the local economy enabled through the income transfer associated with social safety net dimension of school feeding. This is what Peter pointed out earlier, especially if coupled with the purchase of food from local agri-food industry and farmers. Indirect benefits also occur, such as salaries for the caterers, for example. The relevance of school meals has become even more pronounced during COVID-19, given that meals provide food security at times of crisis, as Peter mentioned. This helps children stay motivated, therefore reducing the risk of dropouts. As we know, students from low-income or vulnerable households who benefit the most from well-targeted school meals programs have been disproportionately hit by the pandemic. These are children who in fact account for most of the learning loss in many countries across the world, including Romania. So it's even more critical to ensure that the most vulnerable and disadvantaged children benefit from nutritious meals in schools, especially at times of crisis. A couple of weeks ago, right before Romania entered the fourth wave of the pandemic, I had a chance to visit several schools we worked with as part of the World Bank projects. All schools I visited had enormous needs in terms of infrastructure, equipment, facilities, teacher skills, you name it. The list is long. Yet, almost in all cases, schools were dealing with limited budgets that could not satisfy all these needs immediately. As a result, school principals and local public administration has a gargantuan task to make very difficult choices and at times tough trade-offs. Do I invest in school modernization to make it seismically safe, or do I build a gym to ensure that children have a proper place to attend physical activity classes? Do I invest in better connectivity so that all children can easily and safely travel to school, or more digital devices, sanitary facilities, provision of meals? The approach that we took in the World Bank's Romania Secondary Education Project, our ROSE project, is to give more autonomy to schools to prioritize these investments into improving education outcomes in line with specific needs at a local level. The project is providing grants to about 820 high schools across the country. And through the participatory process, schools decide how to use these grants to achieve a reduction in dropout rates. As a result of this local decision making, we have seen improvement in educational outcomes in about 75% of beneficiary schools. I should highlight that many participating schools have decided to use some part of these grants, among other things, to provide a meal for students spending long hours at school for remedial classes, tutoring, extracurricular activities, and similar type of engagement. These students, most of whom are commuters from nearby localities, would have otherwise not been able to engage in these activities and could have failed to attend important baccalaureate exam classes, for example. I started by quoting numbers, so let me conclude by doing the same. According to a study published by World Bank in 2018, human capital accounts for more than 50% of the total wealth of Romania, being much more important than natural or produced capital. Therefore, to increase its wealth, what Romania needs to do is to expand its human capital. When authorities fail to invest productively in their human capital, the costs are enormous, especially for the poorest and most vulnerable people. But we have an opportunity to give all children a chance to thrive and reach their highest aspiration. So let's use this opportunity wisely and act on it. And I think today's discussion is exploring the ways to do that in the right way. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. It is certain that the World Bank can provide us with enough data to make a strong case for the school meal program, for its extension at the national level. We are very happy and very honored to have you here with us today. And thank you very much for your presentation. I will give the floor to the last but not least Our speaker and co-host today, Mr. Cătălin Teniță, which is member of the Romanian Chamber of the Deputies. I will tell you a few words about who Mr. Cătălin Teniță was before becoming a deputy. He is a law graduate and entrepreneur, and he was very involved in the civil society, being the co-founder and former president of Geeks for Democracy, is one of the civil society organizations that has developed very good and powerful projects for the civil society. And in 2019, he was elected in the Eisenhower Global Fellowship Program. I will give him now the floor to tell us some conclusions, some ending remarks about the Romanian school meal program.
Thank you very much, Andrea. You are an excellent co-host. So we are forced to develop a lot more events, not necessarily just on school meal, but also on libraries. We have something like 4 teams: libraries, school meals, digitalization, and human rights. So that's one direction. If you want to be part of some other, let's say, conferences regarding the other teams, you are invited. Related to that Geeks for Democracy, it's very strange. We didn't discuss previously, but happens. So at Eisenhower Fellows, one of my colleagues was Sanya Go from Jamaica, and she was describing herself as a low-income old-age pension geek. So we, the people from this conference, we are school meal geeks or nerds or let's say passionates about that. So we are in the same community. I don't have any conclusions. We still need to learn a lot. I was writing here, discussing with you. There is a saying: a little knowledge is less than it's more dangerous than none. Basically, in Romania, we have this situation of, let's say, from time to time, or most of the time, in fact, to decide very important matters based on zero information or very, very, very low and reliable information. And what we are trying now to do is this pilot program is to, first of all, to have some kind of reliable information. We still don't have it. We still need to understand things. What we are trying to do with this kind of conferences is not to, let's say, to use them as PR tools. We don't believe in that. It's to find some various experts with various visions, because if you know, school meal program takes probably between, let's say, optimistically 15 years, realistically 13 years for the moment to start it till the moment to develop it fully on, and you have, let's say, a solid program. You still have to improve, but let's say it's very stable. So what we are trying to do is to find those, let's say, design decisions that will help us not to change it very drastically after the first iteration. For example, what we are asking is maybe we should have a free universal model focused on, let's say, on the most vulnerable communities, or maybe we should have a model based on, let's say, vulnerable population from the entire country. Maybe we should try to focus on, let's say, one model that offers, let's say, some level of free meals for some population and some level or subsidize the meals for the other part of the population, or maybe we should have it free for all. Maybe we should focus on the Finnish model with community kitchen, with municipal kitchens, or maybe we should focus on a model based on caterings and, let's say, public providers, or maybe we should focus on a model like the one in, for example, in Washington DC, school association with one provider, or maybe we should focus on the one in New York city with 3 providers and a very regulated agreement contract. So maybe we should focus on let's say, on increasing, let's say, the level of economic wellness in the community, or maybe we should also put in the larger providers, the agro business. So it's very complicated, and what we're trying now is to define these, let's say, structural options for a successful program, and to learn from you. It's one of my ideas. The other one, it's let's say related to the fact in Romania and in most of the, let's say, countries with democracies, we are reached by, let's say, a situation where various parties can't collaborate to, let's say, push for a radical public policy. I remember that, for example, the former Secretary of State, Robert D. Gates, Secretary of Army, sorry, said in the last 20 years in US, the problem is not division. We had the division starting with, let's say, 200 years ago. It's a paralysis, it's immobility. We have the same situation in Romania. For example, now we have this situation about the green passport, the COVID passport, where people are basically immobilized, paralyzed by the fear of a minority, but a very pushy minority. So what we are trying to do now in Romania with this program is to build a large consensus with various parties in order to be able to promote it as a, let's say, common program, not the program of our party or some other parties. So it's shortly, we need the information from you, figures and examples from other countries. We need to build consensus, and we also need to let's say, define the path we think this program should have in the major decisions. Thank you very much for being with us today, and I'm sure you'll come back to some other online conferences and offline events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catalin, for your presentation. And now we are ready to start our Q&A session. And if you allow me, I would like to start with a question for Mr. Rodriguez. I have researched your experience and your work that you performed in many countries, and I came across Indonesia, where I read you supported the process of handing over the World Food Program to the government. Would you kindly detail on this? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, before I do that, I just wanted a comment that a school feeding program is and should not be the responsibility of one ministry. Very often in many countries, the responsibility lies with the Ministry of Education, and that's it. I think it is a government responsibility, and in the decision making, you should have the Ministry of Health, probably nutrition comes under them to ensure that is there. The Ministry of Agriculture, in some countries, the local agricultural producers, the smallholder farmers come into picture, and the Ministry of Finance. So it has to be a government-owned program rather than just one ministry. And some countries have an ministerial committee which is made just so that they can all sit on the table and decide instead of passing the ball to the other. In Indonesia, it was initially a fully funded program so it was a multi-donor trust fund which was being managed. And we realized in the handover that it was very, very effective. So it was the school meals program. And to start off, the schools or the Department of Education did not even know where to start. In a sense, there was no menu plan because we had to use local food resources available. So we had to have a couple of sessions to sit with them to organize a budget. What all do you need? What is available there? And once they had the budget, they realized it was actually a very small percentage of the education budget, which covered the schools, books, chairs, and everything. So we went through a process of planning with them and for them at grassroots, at the district level, as to what would it cost based on the number of schools you had, what is available there. And then we developed it from there. And then we had to involve not only the local budget, then we involved state budget and the national budget and say, okay, we brought all the players into the same room and say, okay, this is what District X needs, or even the village level where it's possible. We costed it out for them. We found out what school, what food was available, who were the producers. It took about a year and a half to go through the process. And once that was done, they thought, oh, that can be done. I mean, earlier the reaction was, no, 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 we can't do that. And when we involved nutritionists to see what is around, we were able to build it up, cost it for them, along with them with the local expertise, and then see who would pay for what. And the biggest challenge was initially when they came out, they were looking at somebody to take decisions. You know, this is what we need per year. I said, you start with what you have. I mean, if you have a 30% of the budget, the momentum should not stall now because it was a funded program by the multi-donor thing. If you stop it, it'll be difficult to start. So join in the budget, what you have from different ministries together at district level, what state can give, at least that could have been decided there, and you kickstart. And luckily, each one of them had, money for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, depending on the interest. And once they did that, they were able to take it forward, and they had 6 months in time to incorporate their costs in the state and the national budgets, because it's a process, it's an annual approval, and some of them were already exhausted. So, but they kept up the momentum, got the budgets passed, and continued with that. I mean, I followed it for a couple of years from there, so I guess it's continuing since then. In a nutshell, that's how we managed to do it. And the other thing, when we restarted program in some of the other provinces down there, we involved the handover of the program right in the beginning. So they were part of the planning where in the districts where we were implementing. So they knew what happens. So they could plan in a couple of years, they could take over in terms of planning the resources and seeing the impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It is very interesting. Indeed, it's a long process before a national program in any country can become the way it should be, can reach its full potential. This is, as Catalin has said, the first edition of a series of conference that we plan to organize monthly, through which we would like to bring to the round table of discussions representatives from all the political parties, because this is an objective that is shared by all political parties, regardless of their political orientation or regardless of their, let's say, sympathies. I think it is important to set it as a goal where we all work together. And now I would like to invite the audience to address questions to the speakers. Does anyone wants to address a question? All right, we have a question from Adelina Dobra, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank her for being so involved in organizing this event. She has put a lot of work into it, and I think she deserves our thanks. So Adelina, you have the floor.
So much, and I'm so happy to be here with you. Well, we saw that all over the world we can find a range of models and trends, including the design and implementation, funding, and a level of community participation in different meal school programs. And in our team and here at the Senate and the Parliament of Romania, we are truly interested in developing nutritionally balanced school meals, and we recently succeeded in passing our amendments, and we proposed a 40% allocation, of minimum 40% allocation of the amount available per pupil. And my question is, do you have this kind of criteria when you choose a provider for the meal that are offered in the schools?
Adelina, who you would like to answer to the question.
Well, for example, in the Finnish model, this kind of criteria was took into account or not?
Yes, thank you for the good question. When we are in the EU, we are obliged by the EU directive on the public tenders and the public procurement. So the municipalities are tendering the service providers if there is a service provider. If the municipality is responsible for offering there is a kitchen and they are responsible for themselves in offering the school meal, then of course there is no need for the tendering. But if we are talking about the separate catering services by private companies, then there is a normal tendering process. And then the criteria is based on the EU criteria, which is the general criteria. Of course, when we are talking about the school feeding, then there is of course the cost, the general cost, and the labor cost, and everything must take into consideration. So it's the balanced approach, and of course the costs in general, they are playing a role, because we need to keep this at the level of the about the 3 euros. So I would say that the normal tendering process, when there are the private or state-owned or the municipality-owned companies, so the normal procedure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Eva Nassar. She is also parliamentary advisor. Eva, you have the floor.
So, thank you very much. Thank you all for the organizers for hosting this. It is brilliant to hear so many perspectives. I guess my questions is from a bottoms-up perspective, so I'm not sure which of the panelists would like to take it, but please feel free. I come from an angle where I understand that participatory development and community engagements are really important, and food security is indispensable. I'm just wondering, how do you formulate the programs in a manner in which they are not disruptive for communities where, say, children play more important roles in their families and in their communities? I have, throughout my work, I've come in contact with communities where children were, say, mediators for their families, or they help their parents guide through society or translate for their parents. And these kind of programs, I found that they were disruptive for the community norms and the cultural values. So I'm wondering, what are the factors that you consider when you formulate programs that are nationwide and that the culture tends to be quite diverse? Thank you.
All right, Mr. Peter Rodriguez, you can take this question.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's very interesting that you asked that. A lot depends also on the size of the country. You have huge countries, for example, in Africa and Asia, where we have worked and we continue to work. Demographically, totally different. Climatically, very diverse. The agriculture is very diverse. In this case, there has to be a participation in planning region-wise or district-wise or village-wise. Then that feeds into it. The role of the local community and the civil society is very important in planning. It is all in the country context, let me be clear. The role of the community members and civil society is very important, because their participation in the planning, implementation, monitoring, and cross-checks is important. anything which is not participatory is going to have loopholes. Is going to have implementation problems if you do not have that. So while you can use the most recently available evidence-based programming to be able to program and budget for that, when it comes to the implementation level on the technicalities on how do you implement, you do need local expertise or local assistance to be able to do that. Top down generally don't try to work in a very diverse country. Small countries, yes, it is possible, where communication, where transportation and all those things is easy, can get from one point to the other. But in big countries, I think it is very important that these things are taken into account. In terms of the communication between the students and thing, it can go both ways, you know. Like I was giving you the Malawi example on, you know, the teachers learning. A lot of the best practices of what, I mean, even for example, a green vegetable cook, you know, grown in the backyard can help you in places where you know, food is not easily available. That kind of information is easier passed from this child to the parent. Very often there's a gap on what is good nutrition. Some schools could give a Coke and a bun. I've seen countries with that because that was easily available. But the fact is, nutrition-based, a good meal is always, that kind of information is important to be passed on from the student to the child or to the parents or in the community where over a period of time it can be adapted to that one. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but those are my thoughts on that. Over.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for this valuable input. We have another question from the audience for Mrs. Anna Akarkatsi, and I apologize if I did not pronounce the name correctly, from Valentina Krivac. Valentina, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And I must say it's been a pleasure so far listening to all these people interested in this really important topic for our community and our society. We're talking about the future of our countries, the students that could take great benefits from this program. So my question to Ms. Anna Akarhatsi is, what do you feel the challenges are from a legislative point of view for Romania in implementing the program? Thank you so much.
Thank you for this question. I think challenges probably will be on multiple levels. One is we have seen examples when there was a successful adoption of the legislation, but then the actual implementation has either taken long time and or wasn't very effective. At the same time, I think we in general, when the World Bank develops any of our programs, I think one of the big focus areas that we include is to strengthen the institutions that are to implement different new programs, initiatives, or activities. And I think what will be very important in case any new policy reform is put forward is not to stop just at the level of adoption of a legislation, but really to think through how the implementation will be rolled out, what institutions need to be strengthened at central and local level, and what type of flexibility and what type of adjustments will need to be done at, for example, community level to accommodate for very specific needs that we may have in different geographies or in different communities. The previous question was about how we can make sure that the programs are adjusted, and so I think that that to me it will be important for any policy, new policy that is introduced, to have a very strong actionable implementation program to bring a lot of agility into it, because I think we will all need to learn as we will be doing. This is not a one overnight process. It's not that, you know, we will introduce the law next morning, everybody will receive the meals. We have heard that it takes time to build up the program. So I think a very well thought through implementation plan that has a very strong institutional and capacity building element for different levels of implementing agency will be important, and something that a lens on inclusion, making sure that the most vulnerable and disadvantaged communities and their specificities are taken into account. I think this will be the three main priorities for me.
Thank you very much for your input. We have one more question from the audience, from Iris Ursa, from the We Care Foundation, in Romanian, Fundația Nou Ne Pasă. Iris, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for your very, very insightful comments, and especially thank you for caring. I think this is the most impressive thing in Romania today. And my question is, from what I understand now, it's a matter of designing the best program. But as everything in Romania is going to be soon a problem of financing such a program. And from my experience, I know that retailers have food retailers especially have a very big problem with food waste and with the very large quantities of food that they have to throw out at the end of almost every day. And this is also a huge cost for them, because in order for this food to be, actually it's usually buried, or it's thrown, for them to throw it out, it's very, very expensive, and they're looking for partners who can assimilate large quantities of food. And of course, this couldn't be a case for a national program, but at least at the level of disadvantaged communities. I was wondering if there are any type of these examples in the world where on the one side, the food waste is reduced in terms of retailers, and it's linked with disadvantaged communities somehow. I know retailers here in Romania are very involved in CSR and in the public problems. So yeah, I was just wondering if there's any of these solutions implemented in any countries, if you know. Thank you very much. And my question is really open, because I don't know who of you would know. Thank you.
All right, so I invite any of our panelists to take this question.
If I may
Your
start,
Excellency,
I already raised this issue of sustainability because it's one of the priorities of the Finnish government. It has been the priority for a long time. There is a climate change and etc. and the loss of the biodiversity, and we cannot continue this kind of a linear economic model. So Finland is advocating and implementing the change into the circular economy. And when we are talking about the circular economy, then we are talking about also the decrease of the food waste. And the schools are one of those institutions which are obliged to decrease food waste. And this is constantly, regularly, every week, every day raised at schools, and not only because of the school feeding. It's part of the environmental studies in Finland. This change into the circular economy and with the less waste, including food waste. And there are, for example, as I mentioned, there are regular campaigning, raising awareness. And I would say that the Finnish youth is very much aware of this the climate change and the challenges related to the biodiversity they pay attention to the food waste issue. So of course, raising the awareness, discussing that, and then to measure to decrease the food waste. And as I mentioned, some of the schools, they are giving and offering that surplus food to the public. So there are many ways, and I think each school and municipality should think of that, what to do with the food waste. But I think one of the most important issue is that you take what you eat, and this is one of the principles at Finnish schools, that you take what you eat, so there won't be any food waste. But this is the everyday life in Finland. But it's an issue which needs to be raised and debated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer, Your Excellency. Does any other speaker would like to address this issue? Right, Mr. Rodriguez, you have the floor.
Now, very quickly, I see my colleague also looking at it. You know, I mean, now that there's so much of talk going on the climate because of COP26, there's a lot of statistics which is available. I mean, at a retail level, the percentage of loss is very, very limited. I mean, globally, I think it's 17 to 20% of food is wasted, of it retail is, I think, 1 or 2%, if I'm not mistaken. But having said that, there are two factors here. One is the ability of the planning stage to use local food or based on the local food habits. If you impose something which is eaten in one province onto the other one in a central program, it is likely to be waste. And the second thing, like Ambassador said, is, you know, the education at the school level of reducing waste is going to help not only at the school level or retail level, even at the household level, which is as high as, I think, about 10 or 12% at this stage. So education is the basic thing, and something which the children do enjoy eating is something which I think we can promote. There are a lot of studies here of how, not of studies, I think we have a center in Uganda who basically helps to reduce school waste, not school waste, food waste at different levels from post-harvest to other things. So there is information available when we develop a program. If you need more information, I'm sure I can connect to the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. Indeed, education is the key to solving all problems, including the environmental problems. Mrs. Akautsi, would you like to?
Yes, I just wanted to add this dimension, because I think the question also was about not necessarily school food waste generated at schools, but also how can we in general leverage some food waste that may be in the retail sector and bring it to the most disadvantaged in need, not necessarily just through school meals programs, but in general. So what I have seen working in some cases, of course, it's private sector-led solutions, and its use of some digital solutions like an app or a platform where that links the waste producer with somebody who is in need of the food, and there are. I'm sure that there are, so many different examples of effective solutions like that. What is very important is that this to me is much more of a kind of a community-driven and community-driven solution, and needs to be adapted to the fabric of individual communities. Now, I think I'm very positive that in Romania such solutions can be generated and then scaled up pretty effectively, given the sophistication of the ICT sector and the level of innovation that we see in private sector. So I think it's a combination of some local initiative with this kind of expertise that we have in this country can help to proliferate, and it may be worth as one of the follow-ups to do some mapping of what solutions worked at scale, because I think that will be the most important thing to find some solutions that could work at scale in other countries, and then bring that to Romania. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. We have already exceeded the allotted time by 10 minutes. Therefore, I would like to suggest to take one more question from one of the members of the audience, and then I will invite Cătălin to present his final remarks. And the question is from Domenico Granu. He is a student enrolled in a shadowing program here with one of our deputies. So, Dominic, you have the floor. She, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here with you. My question would be for Mr. Rodriguez. Of course, what we're debating here, the plan and the program itself, its dimension requires time. We will see results in 15 years, 5 years, 10 years. What solution do we have for the children that need our assistance now when it comes to food in school? For example, for me, I just graduated high school, and I know that a school meal would have been greatly appreciated and would have contributed so greatly to my development. So what would be your proposition to help our children now, also in the future? We've seen a lot of contributions here today that it will allow Romania to kind of cut corners by learning from your experience. But at the same time, what can we do today to help our children? Thank you.
Wow. I think the whole idea here, obviously, you have the right people at the decision-making body present in this meeting, and those who can decide what is best for the country. On our part, we can provide technical assistance, guidance, experience from different parts of the world to make it the best program. But for me, it would be you start with what you have with the community involvement. Do not wait, for the government at different levels to do everything for you. That means mobilizing of the community, mobilizing of the students, mobilizing of the parents. If there is awareness that it is going to benefit the child, every parent will contribute. One way or the other, incentivize the program at that level. So that kind of motivation needs to be there. That kind of help needs to be there. You have local members of parliament who represent there, or legislative assembly, or mayors. You need to engage with them as students to say that this is important and how do we start. It need not be a full-fledged, perfectly balanced nutritional meal, but you have to start. And that's something what we did in Indonesia, in the sense, all right, while you work out the best way to do it from a dependent, overseas dependent food nutrition and school feeding program to a locally or nationally owned program, there is, you need to start at whatever level you can to be able to do that. And you have the lawmakers on your side, and the local communities on your side. If you have them, I think you should be able to start. And then you do have, the other countries also who may be able to share their experience, expertise, and quick fix issues to start off with. So ideal program can take time, but this one, I think at a normal level, you can at least attempt to start and then let it pick up if the need is felt so much on that level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe it is time to wrap this conference to an end. Thank you very much for all your inputs. You have been amazing panelists, and it was an honor for me to serve today as the moderator of this conference. I hope we will have many chances to meet in similar circumstances on the same subject and also on other subjects. And also, I would like to thank to the audience for being so great. And least but not last, I will give the floor to Catalin for the final remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be very, very short. From time to time, I discuss with, let's say, colleagues or members of some other parties or friends about this program. And basically, I tend to describe myself as liberal, people that believe in, let's say, free trade, free initiative, and not necessarily, let's say, in various ways where the state intrudes in the life of an individual. So I'm asked why are you saying that here is different? And I tend to question myself in the same direction. There is a quote I tell Andrea or Alexandra or Silvio all the time. It's from Melville, and it's something like this. I don't have the exact quote. It's when we are trying to expand the liberty, we tend to increase the empire of necessity. So it's important as legislators to understand what we are doing when we are doing things we believe they are good. But that's the theoretical part. But when we are looking at let's say at the figures related to school meal programs, we see something that is very strong from my point of view. The communities where, let's say, you introduce serious school meal programs drops in terms of domestic violence. The rate of domestic violence is totally correlated with the rate of, let's say, lack of economic opportunities. Also, let's say the rate of let's say human labor and child trafficking or person trafficking is related to poverty. So what we are doing when we are working for school meal programs is to try to increase the liberty of individuals. If we are doing that, we are not doing that because the people, let's say, are not capable of getting their own meals, but we are doing that in order to increase the liberty and, let's say, and the stabilities of communities. The communities that can then increase economically and, let's say, will be not dependent of these programs anymore, but will be able to, let's say, to become strong economical actors in a society. That's my believing of related to the meaning of the program. We are doing that both for the wellness of the children, but also to increase the liberty on the longer term. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much for being here. Once again, the co-hosts of today's event are Anca Dragu, the President of the Senate, Cătălin Tăniță from the Chamber of Deputies, and Irineu Darou from the Romanian Senate. Thank you very much to our amazing panelists, and have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.